All right, and shalom, shalom. So I want to welcome everybody to Oklahoma City King James Bible University, and just good morning, everybody. Then I'm Deacon Micah, and today, then we are going to be just doing an interesting lesson. Just going to be covering up on the semicolon, just doing the teaching on how it operates and how it functions, and how then we are to use it when we're going through Bible studies, and just at the same time, breaking down the semicolon, and I am going to be doing a Bible study. So it's two wrapped into one for this morning. So just overall, then what spawned all of this is we had just received an email, which I blocked out who it came from because that's just not important. But I had received an email, and it reads, so hello, Deacon Micah. I hope you're doing well, and I sent you an email a while ago explaining my absence from the classes because I wasn't understanding. I prayed for understanding, and I've been meditating on Isaiah chapter 28, verse 10, which took me to Isaiah 28 and 13, and now I'm rightly dividing the word and seeing the separation all throughout the Bible, and I can prove it in the scriptures, and I pray that you see what I see because I was shown for a reason. So what's going on with semicolon, according to what this person was sending in, is this semicolon, they're looking at it as on one side of the semicolon, then it has God's thoughts, and on the other side of the semicolon is what Satan is showing. So right here where my mouse is at, we have, so Satan already knows that God is not going to answer. That's why we see the truth in Satan's version of the truth, which we'll look at the second email, which I blocked it out too. And right here where my mouse is at now, so there's no separation. So this person is asking a question. So the semicolon is not the line we are to read. All the line are not connected. We have to divide his wisdom, so it's talking about God, from the wisdom of the world. And I pray that you see. So this is why we're doing this morning breakdown of the semicolon, because that's not how you are to look at the semicolon as every semicolon you see in scripture, then it's dividing what God's thoughts are from Satan's thoughts. No, that's a false understanding of what the semicolon is. So this is not going to end up being just a one-day lesson. We're going to go through this a couple more times throughout this month, and probably into April as well. So before we get started, then I pulled a video from the Oxford English Dictionary, which we're over here in America, then we're speaking English, which is just a bastard tongue of the England dialect, and they're going to explain the semicolon, and afterwards, and we'll get into the precepts.
Hello, I'm Ollie. Welcome to Oxford Online English. In this lesson, you can learn about using colons and semicolons in writing. Next, let's look at using a semicolon. Like a colon, a semicolon has one main use. We use it to show a connection between two complete sentences. A semicolon is actually similar to a full stop. It's generally the writer's choice whether to use a full stop or a semicolon. A semicolon is used instead of a full stop because the writer wants to show that two ideas are more closely connected. A semicolon is used instead of a full stop because the writer wants to show that two ideas are more closely connected. For example, the population of Shanghai is around 24 million. Beijing has around 22 million people. Our second example, we knew he was guilty. There was no evidence, however. You can see in both of these examples that the parts before and after the semicolon could both be full sentences. So we could use a full stop in the first sentence after 24 million and then start a new sentence with the word Beijing. That would be possible. Also in the second sentence, we could use a full stop after guilty and then start a new sentence. The second important point is that both parts of the sentence, before and after the semicolon, are talking about a related topic. In the first example, both parts of the sentence are about the population of Chinese cities. In the second, Both parts are obviously about the same criminal case and the same person. So we use the semicolon to show that two ideas or two sentences are very closely related or talking about the same topic. Often, when we want to join two sentences in English, we use a connecting word like and or but or therefore, for example. When you join two sentences using a semicolon, you don't need to use a connecting word. However, if you use a connecting word to join two sentences, you sometimes need to use a semicolon and sometimes a comma. It depends what the connecting word is. To join sentences using and, or, but, yet, or while, you should use a comma. To join two sentences using however, therefore, nevertheless, or meanwhile, you should use a semicolon. These lists are not complete. There are other connecting words which require a comma or a semicolon. However, these are the most common, and the most important thing is to remember that for some connecting words you need to use a comma, and for others you have to use a semicolon. So here's our example from before about the population of Shanghai or Beijing. In this case, there's no connecting word. There's no word like but or and or however, so we use a semicolon. Okay, here's the same sentence but a little bit different. In this case, we're using the connecting word while. With while, we need to use a comma. We can't use a semicolon in this case. Another example, this time we use the connecting word however. A however is used with a semicolon. A full stop would also be possible. Semicolons have one other use. They can be used in lists when the items on the lists contain commas. Usually, when we make a list, we use commas to separate the items on the list. For example, we need milk, eggs, sugar, and flour. We put a comma after each item, after milk, after eggs, and so on. But if the items on your list are not just words, but phrases which include commas, we use semicolons to separate the items on the list. Let's take a look. We traveled to 4 cities: Santa Fe, which is in New Mexico, Denver, Colorado, Las Vegas, Nevada, and finally Los Angeles in California. In this case, we use semicolons to separate the items on the list because the items on the list already include commas. If we used commas to separate the items, it would be very confusing and difficult to read. Let's look at one more example. Only 3 people showed up: Tom, the head of accounting, Maria, who works in the sales department, and Ellie, who's doing an internship here. Again, the items on the list are phrases which include commas, so it's much clearer to use semicolons to separate the parts of the list. So both the colon and the semicolon are used to show a connection between two ideas, but they operate in a very different way. Let's finish by comparing the colon and the semicolon directly. So in these 3 examples, the only difference is the punctuation, but it does make a big difference to the meaning. In the first case, the full stop shows that there is no necessary connection between these 2 ideas. We have a problem, and he isn't doing enough to help me. These could be totally separate things. In the second case, with the semicolon, it shows that the ideas are related somehow. I'm talking about the same topic. In the third sentence, with the colon, we mean that the problem is his attitude. The problem is that he isn't doing enough to help. To make this clearer, let's put these sentences in other words. In the first case, with the semicolon, we could also say, we have a problem, and he isn't doing enough to help me with this problem. In the sentence with the colon, we could also say, we have a problem, which is that he isn't doing enough to help me. If you can understand the difference here, that's a good sign. It means you really understand the difference between colons and semicolons. Okay, that's the end of the lesson. I hope it was useful. If you're watching on YouTube, I suggest you see the full version of this lesson on our website. The full version includes text and exercises, so you can read and review the lesson. You can also practice to check that you've understood. That's all. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.
All right, so the video is over with, and now we're getting back into the Bible study. So, just from Ali over there with the Oxford Online English, then they'd already explained what the semicolon then it does. And it's for a separation between two ideals that are closely connected, where in that case, the ideals are closely connected and you don't have to use the full stop to just separate it from the other idea. So for today's lesson, we are going to break down Isaiah chapter 40, verse 7, and Isaiah chapter 64, verse 6. And next week, then I'll get to Proverbs chapter 1, verse 28 through 29. So without further ado, here is my preceptor, and we're going to start with just warming up our way to those two precepts. So what we're looking at on screen right now is we have the precept written communication tool, and we're looking at Genesis chapter 36, verse 1 through 4, just warming up to the semicolon. So right here it has the topic in verse 1. So now these are the generations of Esau, who is Edom. So it's just telling you that Esau then is Edom. And in verse 2, then we see what he did. So Esau took his wives of the daughters of Canaan. And there's our semicolon right there, which I got to put that back up there, and it went away. All right, so there's our semicolon right there. So the next part of this verse, then it's connected to what's on the other side of the semicolon. And however, then it's getting ready to give us some list, but it's still connected to this thought right here, that he took his wives of the daughters of Canaan. So on the other side of the semicolon, and we see Ada, the daughter of Elon, the Hittite, and Aholabama, the daughter of Aina, the daughter of Zibeon, the Hivite. So then you see right there in verse 2, then it's the connection between those thoughts, and it's telling you right here on the first side of the semicolon that he took wives of the daughters of Canaan, and it's giving you a list items of who these wives are. And then we have another semicolon, so we're getting ready to separate these two ideals that are connected. So in verse 3, we have and, so it's a semicolon, and an and. So we're making a separation between these two lists. So in verse 3, and Bathshemeth, Ishmael's daughter, sister of Nebajoth. So the reason why we have to put that other semicolon here between these daughters of Canaan and between Ishmael's daughter is because they are coming from the different fathers, but in verse 1, then it's closely related to the same topic, that these are the generations of Esau. So for Canaan, what we'll do is we have Genesis chapter 10, verse 15 over here on the right side, and we're going to look at these daughters of Canaan, these sons of Canaan. So in Canaan begat Sidon, his firstborn, in Heth, in Jebusite, and the Amorite, and the Girgashite, and the Hivite. So this Hivite, then this is tying into what's going on over here in Genesis chapter 36, verse 2, with Aholabama, the daughter of Anna, the daughter of Zibeon, the Hivite. And for that Hittite, this is tying into Heth right here, for the daughter of Elon, the Hittite. So Heth. So it's showing you right there that these are the sons of Canaan, and these wives, then they're of the fathers of the sons of Canaan. But you have to put the semicolon here going into verse 3, because Ishmael, then this is coming from an entirely different lineage, where you look at Genesis, and we'll go to chapter 16, and we'll go to 15 and 16. So, and Hagar bare Abram a son, and Abram called his son's name, which Hagar bare, Ishmael. And Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bare Ishmael to Abram. So, just going back over here to Genesis chapter 36, verse 1 through 4. So the topic then it remains the lineages, so the generations of Esau. In verse 2, we get the action. So Esau took wives of the daughters of Canaan. So these are his wives that are coming from Canaan. So we're separating this action with the semicolon for these list items, which the wives that he took. So Ada and Alabama. We have to put another semicolon here because we have to separate Beth-Shemesh from these other two wives because they're coming from Ishmael. So all of three of these right here, so Ada and Halabama and Beth-Shemesh, these are list items. And these right here are list items of this topic up here, the generations of Esau. So we're putting the second semicolon here to separate the daughter of Ishmael that Esau took from the daughters of Canaan that he took. But overall, then these are all list items of this topic up here. So we end with the full stop, which is over here in the United States, we call it a period. So now we have verse 4. So now we have a new topic. And Ada bare to Esau Eliphaz. So then that child. And we have the semicolon there to separate this ideal from the other one that's still connected with it. And Beth-Shemesh, so this is that wife that he took of Ishmael, bare Reveal. So before then we get over to the next exhibit, does everybody see what's going on so far with the semicolon, that it's used to put that separation there between two ideals that are connected, and they're also used in list items if there's phrases or commas that are already there to prevent that confusion. So I just don't want to go any further until then I make sure that everybody's tracking along. All right, so we have Wade, so Sister Brown, Cynthia Eden, Wanda Smith, Sister Collins, Shirley Greer, Elin Price, okay, Lester. Okay, all right, so that's Exhibit A. So we'll take this down, this Bible, and we'll get to the right side, which now we're looking at Genesis chapter 29, verse 15 through 17, and we'll put this other Bible up on the right side, on the left side, that is. All right, so picking it up at Genesis 29 and 15. And Laban said unto Jacob, so we have a speech going right here in verse 15. Because thou art my brother, should thou therefore serve me for naught, which not, then it means no value. So tell me, so he has a request. What shall thy wages be? So he just asked him a question. And then now picking it up at verse 16, and Laban had 2 daughters. So that's the topic. Then he has these 2 daughters. And now we have a colon. So it's given an explanation on what was just said right here, these 2 daughters. So the name of the elder was Leah. So characterization of that first daughter. And the name of the younger was Rachel. So that's second characterization of the topic, which is these 2 daughters. And then we have the period. So that's the full stop, that thought, and it's over with. So now we're getting a new one. So in verse 17, Leah, she's the topic now. So we've got a separation from these 2 daughters. So Leah is now the topic, was tender-eyed. So nowhere in this verse right here, well, on this side of the semicolon, it's Rachel there, because the focus is Leah. So Leah was tender-eyed, which we're going to get into this because this does have a spiritual understanding behind it. But we have that semicolon there. So this idea, then that thought is done, and we're getting a whole new idea that's connected to this. But Rachel was beautiful and well favored. So on this side of the semicolon, the topic is Rachel, and we're getting a characterization of her was beautiful and well favored. So this is where things is going to get spiritual and interesting. So, when you look at this foundationally, carnally, then you'll not understand what this tender eye that's going on with Leah and with Rachel. Then it'll just stop at your understanding being that she was beautiful and attractive. But we have to look at what's being said spiritually, because the Most High, then he speaks to us in spirit. It means through its spiritual understanding. So we'll start with Rachel being beautiful and well favored. So we'll pick it up at Proverbs chapter 6, verse 25. And it reads, "So lust not after her beauty in thine heart," so that wisdom, spiritually, that beauty, "neither let her take thee with her eyelids. For by means of a whorish woman, a man is brought to a piece of bread," so a piece of doctrine, "and the adulteress will hunt for the precious life." So this is what this is telling you, that not to go lusting after the beauty of another woman, because you get taken by her eyelids and you're going to be brought to this other piece of doctrine, which will tie into this. And we'll look at Genesis chapter 3, and we'll go to verse 6. "And when the woman," so then that's our spirits right there, "saw that the tree was good for food," so you lusting after that beauty, "and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruits of the works thereof, and did learn, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat." So this is what happens when you go lusting after the beauty of another woman. Which the reason why we're running these two precepts is when this ties back into Rachel, then we do know which scriptures, which it's better just to show it than to talk about it. We'll go to Genesis chapter 31, verse 30 through 34, that Rachel, then she held to the ways of her father. So we'll pull us up right here. So Genesis chapter 31, verse 30 through 34. And now that I remembered, for this lesson right here, there's not going to be any precept cheat sheets. And I just remembered that'll resume next week when I do my next lesson. But for this one, there will be no cheat sheets. So just, if you want to take notes, please do that. So Genesis chapter 31, verse 30 through 34. "And now, though thou wouldest needs be gone, because thou sore longest after thy father's house," so this is Laban talking to Jacob, "yet wherefore hast thou stolen my gods?" So he's bringing this accusation against Jacob, but which Jacob, he didn't take the gods. Rachel did. "And Jacob answered and said to Laban, Because I was afraid, for I said peradventure that thou wouldest take by force thy daughters from me. With whomsoever thou findest thy gods, let him not live. Before our brethren discern, thou wouldest thine with me, and take it to thee. For Jacob knew not that Rachel had stolen them. And Laban went into Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent." So he went into their tents and into the two maidservants' tents, but he found them not, because that's not the lifestyle that Jacob or Leah was into. "Then went he out of Leah's tent and entered into Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the images," so she had taken the example, "and put them in the camel's furniture," which, elder, than he had just did that lesson yesterday about Leviticus chapter 11, who to learn and who not to learn from, "and sat upon them." So Rachel, then she's sitting on his camel, which we know that the camel, then it stores up fat, and it stores up so much fat that you can see it visibly where it forms those lumps, and it can just go long days without eating or drinking, because then it's going off of that fat that it's stored up. And look what Rachel took. Then she took the images and put them in a camel's furniture. So she took that example, that belief system, she took those gods and sat upon them. So that's just what she's sitting on, then a whole nother image. "And Laban searched all the tent, but he found them not." So this is what we're looking at with Rachel. So we'll tie in this some more before, I give the foundational takeaway from this. So now we'll go to First Idris, and we will go to chapter 1 and look at verse 26 and 27. Actually, that's wrong precept. Let me find this precept real quick. Excuse me. Okay, so it's First Idris chapter 4, verse 26 and 27. So I'm going to fix that. So First Idris 4 and 26 and 27. So this is a precept. So yeah, many there be that have run out of their wits for women, so for spirits, and become servants for their sakes. Many also have perished, have perished, have erred. So you've erred from that path that we're supposed to be on, and sinned for women, so for these other spirits. So let's look at this. So we're going to add on to this, and we'll look at nymph, and we'll go to chapter 3, and we'll look at verse 4. And this is why. So because of the multitude of the whoredoms, so the fornications of the well-favored harlot, so the mistress of witchcrafts that selleth nations through her whoredoms, and families through her witchcrafts. So this is what happens when you get caught up with these spirits that have their own images. They'll bring you to a whole nother piece of doctrine, and through that doctrine, you'll get sold through these whoredoms. So this well-favored, just hone in on that right there, that well-favored. And look at what's going back on with Rachel. But Rachel was beautiful and well-favored. So those precepts that I just ran, then it's showing you that unlike Leah and Jacob, because Laban and he went in their tents and he didn't find the gods there. Rachel is the one that had them. And then she was sitting upon that image. So this is that characterization of Leah. When you look at this, not Leah, Rachel. So this is that characterization of Rachel spiritually, that she's holding on to this lifestyle then that's coming from her father that's not of God. Now let's go to Leah. So Leah was tender-eyed, so she's tender-spirited, tender-hearted. So we'll go to Proverbs, and we will look at chapter 4 and verse 3 and 4. For I was my father's son, so my father's servant, tender and only beloved in the sight, so the understanding of my mother. And your mother, then she's going to bring you up and nourish you with then her breast. So that knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. He taught me also and said unto me, let thine heart retain my words and keep my commandments and live. Which will build up on this, and we will go to the book of Ruth. And we will look at chapter 1, verse 15 through 17. So Ruth chapter 1 and verse 15 through 17. And she said, behold, thy sister-in-law is gone back unto her people. So this is Naomi talking unto Ruth about her sister Oprah. And she said, behold, so thy sister-in-law is gone back unto her people and unto her gods. So you just, while we're running through these precepts, just think about Rachel. Then Rachel, then she had her father's gods. And in this verse right here, we see that Oprah, then she went back unto her people and unto her gods. So now look at what Naomi is getting ready to tell Ruth. So return thou after thy sister-in-law. And look how Ruth responded. And Ruth said, entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go. And there's that semicolon. So then we're getting a whole nother idea that's tying into how Ruth is responding to Naomi. And where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Got a colon here, so we're getting a complete clarification on what she just told Naomi. So thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Where thou diest, will I die, and there will I be buried. Which we know that Leah, then she was buried with Jacob. Rachel, then she was buried somewhere else. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught by death part thee and me. So we'll look at Genesis, and we'll go to chapter 49. We'll scroll down, and we'll look at chapter 49, verse 30 and 32. And the cave is in the field of Malchipah, which is before Mamre, in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought with the field of Ephron the Hittite for possession of a burying place. There they buried Abraham and Sarah, his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah, his wife. Which, let me go back and read verse 31. So there they buried Abraham and Sarah, his wife. So there's that semicolon. So we're getting a whole new idea here. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah, his wife. Semicolon. And there I buried Leah. So Leah, then she was buried where Jacob was buried, and you see that Rachel, then she was buried somewhere else. So with all of that being said, we'll go back to this tenderhearted, and we will look at Ezekiel, and we will go to chapter 36, verse 26 and 27. So Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 26 and 27. And this is that tenderhearted. A new heart also will I give you, and a new spirit will I put within you. And I will take away the stony heart out of your flesh, and I will give you an heart of flesh. So that stony heart, that hard-headed heart, where his word won't be able to take root, then that's gone. And he's given this tender heart. And I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes, and you shall keep my judgments and do them. So, taking us right back to what's right here in the precept written communication tool, we have the characterization of the spirits of these two women. So see that Leah was tender-eyed. So then she's cleaving more unto Jacob and the God of Israel. And we have Rachel, on the other hand, then she held unto the lifestyle, that image that she had grown up in following after her father, Laban. And a while back, then the elder, then he did a teaching on this, so finding Leah. So gotta make sure that you're cleaving onto the right spirit, because one of them is going to lead you down the wrong path. And when you look at this also, foundationally, and also you look at this application wise, for the men that are out there, examine yourselves and just look at the woman that you may be tied to. Then is she in another doctrine? Is she in another belief system? Because if so, then you have whole nother problem that's on your hands, because then if you're not diligent and you don't have that whole armor of God, girded round about you, then you could easily get brought to another image, another lifestyle. You get brought to another God, and then you have that problem. So back in verse 17, the semicolon, it has to be there, because then it's showing you a separation between these two ideas right here that are connected. So in this verse, and it's talking about their characterizations, but you have to put that semicolon there, because this thought right here, then it's separate from this one right here. Their personalities, their spirits, they're different from one another. But it's not at any time now, let's say Leah, then this whole thought is over with. Now Satan is speaking. No, then it's It's just letting you know that right here, Leah was tender-eyed, so it's giving you a characterization of who Leah is. Put that semicolon there, so change in direction, because now the topic is now Rachel was beautiful and well favored. So before then we move on to the next exhibit, then I'm just looking at the comment section, and I just want to make sure that there's no sort of questions, any comments or concerns about that example with the semicolon between Leah and Rachel in their characterizations. So then I'm just waiting for a couple of secs, and then I'll end up moving on. All right. Got it. All right, so now then we'll move on over to next exhibit. So now then we're going to start targeting Isaiah chapter 40 in verse 1 through 8, because then that's tying into that first precept that was a part of this email, so that Isaiah chapter 40 verse 7. So we're going to break that down and get the understanding of what's going on there. So now then on the precept written communication tool, we got Isaiah chapter 40 and verse 1 through 8. So topic is right here in verse 1. So comfort ye my people, saith your God. So this is where this message is coming from. So we get an elaboration in verse 2. So speak ye comfortably to Jerusalem, which spiritually, then we know Jerusalem, and this is talking about the people. And so just don't focus on a land that's overseas, and just the people that the Most High placed its way in, which that it run you right to 1 Corinthians 3 and 16, that we are the temple of God, and the Spirit of God, then it dwells in us. So think about the people spiritually when you look at Jerusalem. And cry unto her, and this is why you're crying unto Jerusalem. So the two purposes, that her warfare is accomplished. So that first purpose, and then the other one, that her iniquity is pardoned. So then we'll stop right here and make a Bible study out of this. So this warfare, then what's going on there is this warfare, then that's talking about this race that's going on that every last one of us has to take part in. So we'll go to 1 Corinthians, and we will look at chapter 9 and verse 24. Know ye not that they which run in a race, so that they, that's plural, so you have participants, and not just one, you have participants with the S there. So know ye not that they which run in a race run all, but one receiveth the prize. So run that ye may obtain. So, Paul, then he's breaking this down of what's going on about this warfare being accomplished, which we'll look at the participants when we go to Galatians. We'll go to chapter 5 and verse 16 and 17. So now we're going to Galatians chapter 5 and verse 16 and 17. So this I say then, so walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. For the flesh lusteth against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary the one to the other, so that you cannot do the things that you would. So this is that warfare that all of us have to battle out. Then we have the Spirit and the flesh racing against one another, and only one is going to win. And we want the Spirit to win and not the flesh. So for this warfare, what happens is you have to make sure that you're ruling over your body properly, and you're just not letting the lust of the flesh reign throughout your body. So what we'll see is in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5 and 6. So casting down imaginations, so these thoughts, and every high thing that exalted itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. So that warfare, then every time that flesh wants to raise itself up, then you beat it back down. So that semicolon, and having in a readiness to revenge all disobedience when your obedience is fulfilled. So this is that warfare that we're looking at over here in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 2. So speak ye comfortably to Jerusalem and cry unto her that her warfare is accomplished and that her iniquity is pardoned, which that iniquity, then it's going to be pardoned if you're sincerely turning from your wicked ways and desiring the Creator, which Malachi, so we'll look at the book of Malachi, and we will go to chapter 3 and verse 16 and 17 right here. So Malachi chapter 3, verse 16 and 17. So then they that feared, so desired the Lord, spoke often one to another, and the Lord hearkened and heard it, and a book of remembrance was written before him for them that desired the Lord and that thought upon his way. So you're thinking on his ways, turning from your own ways. And they shall be mine. And when it's talking about that they, then these are those that are written in that book of remembrance, saith the Lord of hosts. And that day when I make up my jewels, which that's tying also into what Elder was talking about. That, you look at the parable, then that earth, then it's just the dust, it's the ground. And the Creator, then he's looking for those precious stones, then it's clear, then it's refined, and it's pure. So it's semicolon, that's a full thought. Then we have another idea that's closely connected to this people that the Most High wants to take into possession. And I will spare them as a man spareth his own son that serveth him. So, the people that's going to be thinking on the Creator's way, they're going to be the ones that are going to be these jewels that the Creator is looking for. So we have to make sure that this warfare, which is to say this strife between our flesh and our spirit, then it's accomplished and that we mortify the deeds of the body. So speak ye comfortably to Jerusalem and cry unto her that her warfare is accomplished and that her iniquity is pardoned, which I forgot a precept. We'll look at another one. Then we have Jonah, and we'll look at chapter 3 and verse 10. So Jonah 3 and 10. And this is tying into that iniquity being pardoned. So when God saw their works, that they turned from their evil way, and that's that semicolon, so getting a new thought. And God repented of the evil that he had said that he would do unto them. So semicolon, and he did it not. So you have three different thoughts that are tied to the same idea, which is that's the Creator turning from the recompense that he has set for the ungodly. So God saw their works, that they turned from their evil way, and God repented, so reminded of the evil that he had said that he would do unto them, and he did it not, because they thought upon his way. So that's what we have to do then if we want our iniquity pardoned. Otherwise, then we'll move on to the next part of this verse in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 2. For she, so this is Jerusalem, this is us, has received of the Lord's hand double for all of her sins. That's that double portion. So we'll look at how this works right here. So we'll pull up Deuteronomy, and we will go to chapter 21, and we will look at verse 15 through 17. So if a man have two wives, so two spirits, so one beloved and another hated. So then you have one then that's of the world and this fleshly, sensual, devilish spirit, and one that's of the Creator. So one beloved and one hated, and they have borne him children, so works both the beloved and the hated. And if the firstborn son be hers that was hated, then it shall be, when he maketh his sons to inherit that which he has, that he shall not make the son of the beloved firstborn before the son of the hated, which is indeed the firstborn, but he shall acknowledge the son of the hated for the firstborn, by giving him a double portion of all that he has. For he is the beginning of his strength. The right of the firstborn is his. So, what's going on in this verse is we have to pull up this other Bible because we have a lot to unpack there. So now then we're running 2. And we'll take this back from the top. So we'll start right at verse 15, where it has these 2 spirits. So if a man have 2 wives, so these are 2 spirits, so one beloved and another hated. So we're going to define, these 2 spirits. So we'll first go to deal with the spirit of the hated. So we'll go to John and we will look at chapter 3 and verse 19. So this is John 3 and 19. And this is the condemnation, that light, so this truth, righteousness is come into the world, and men loved darkness rather than light. So this sin, just our own ways rather than the ways of God, because their deeds were evil. And, there's more to add on to this when we go to Malachi, which we'll go back up to Malachi and we will look at chapter 1, verse 11 through 13. So Malachi 1 and 11 through 13. For from the rising of the sun, even unto the going down of the sun, my way shall be great among the Gentiles. And in every place incense shall be offered unto my way, in a pure offering. For my way shall be great among the heathen, saith the Lord of hosts. But ye have profaned it, in that ye say that the table of the Lord, so then this doctrine of the Lord is polluted, and the fruits or the works thereof, even his meat, is contemptible. So this is then what we say about then his table. Ye say also, behold, what a weariness is it, so that it's some sort of a burden, and you have snuffed at it, saith the Lord of hosts, and you brought that which was torn, and the lame, and the sick. Thus you brought an offering, and shall I accept this of your hand, saith the Lord. So, he's already told us what type of offering to make unto him, and, we bring, the fruits of the ground, then we bring things that are lame, sick, and torn. So, we're running these precepts right here. So when you go back to Deuteronomy 21 and 15, these 2 spirits, the one beloved, then this is that spirit that's over the darkness, over the flesh, and another hated, so that spirit of light. And they have borne him children, both the beloved and the hated. And if the firstborn son be hers that was hated, then it shall be, when he maketh his sons to inherit that which he has, that he may not make the son of the beloved, so the son that's spirit that's over this darkness, firstborn before the son of the hated, so the one that's of the light, which is indeed the firstborn. But he shall acknowledge the son of the hated for the firstborn, and this is how, by giving him a double portion of all that he has. So we'll look at Daniel, and we will go to chapter 12, and we'll look at verse 2. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. So some to everlasting life, so there's that double portion for the son of the hated, and some to shame and everlasting contempt, which is that double portion that's for the children that's of this darkness. So you're dwelling in the flesh. So we'll pull back up the precept written communication tool, and we'll go right back here to verse 2. So, for she has received of the Lord's hand double for all of her sins. And that's that double portion. So for the people that's going to serve the Creator in spirit and truth, they have that eternal life. And for ones that are going to do things their own way and walk after the flesh, then you have that double portion. So you're going to die in this life, and then you're going to die in the life to come. So the voice, so the spirit of him that crieth in the wilderness, so prepare ye the way of the Lord. So that's that crying in the wilderness. And make straight in the desert a highway for our God, which we'll look at this highway. So we have Isaiah chapter 35 and 8. So Isaiah 35, and we will look at verse 8. And a highway shall be there, and a way, and it shall be called the way of holiness. So the unclean shall not pass over it, but it shall be for those. So the wayfaring man, though fools, shall not err therein. So then he's telling us this highway, then it's the way of holiness, which we'll add on to this, and we'll look at John chapter 14, and we'll look at verse 6. So John 14 and 6. Actually, this is the wrong. So John 14 and 6. So Jesus saith unto him, so I am the way, so that highway, so the truth and the life. So no man cometh unto the Father but by me. So that's what you consider when you look at this highway that's going on over here in Isaiah chapter 40. So make straight in the desert, so this wilderness where there's no water, a highway for our God. So every valley shall be exalted, and every mountain and hill shall be made low. And the crooked shall be made straight, and the rough places plain. So this is what's going on here. So with this, every mountain and hill shall be exalted, then this is just no different than what Yahushua was talking about in Matthew chapter 23, verse 12, which will run those precepts. So Matthew 23, and we'll look at verse 12. And whosoever shall exalt himself shall be abased, which there's that semicolon. So we're shifting direction. And he that shall humble himself shall be exalted. So that's what's going on there with every mountain and hill being made low and the valleys being exalted. We have even more with the crooked places, the crooked path being made straight, which all of this, and this is being done through that desire and, committing yourself to wisdom. So we have Sirach, and we have chapter 4 and verse 16 through 18. So if a man commit himself unto her, he shall inherit her, and his generation shall hold her in possession. For at the first she will walk with him by crooked ways, and bring so fear and dread upon him, and torment him with her discipline, until she may trust his soul, and try him by her laws. Then, after she can trust your soul, will she return the straight way unto him, and comfort him. So this is tying right back into what's going on right here in verse 2. So speak ye comfortably to Jerusalem, and cry unto her. So returning that straight path back unto you, and comfort him and show him her secrets. So we'll take this down and we'll move back on with Isaiah. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken it, which we already know in Isaiah 55 and 11, then he's already made it clear that his word is not going to return void, and it's going to accomplish all that he sent it to do, and it's going to prosper in it. Which one of them is that all of us, and we're going to see this gospel. And if you end up inheriting yourself to it, then you'll be as that valley that's being exalted. And then the people that's just going to cast it behind their back, what happens is when you end up denying a creator down here, he's going to deny you before his father. So let's go ahead and look at this right here. So we have Matthew, and we have chapter 24 and verse 14. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations. So, you're not coming across these channels such as this, hearing these precepts. It's not by accident. When you hear these messages, whatever device that you're listening to, maybe your TV or your computer or your phone, that's that gospel, this light and this glory of the Lord, as in Isaiah chapter 40 verse 5, then it's being revealed right to you. So you saw it. So everybody then they're going to see it. And it's just all up to you then what you're going to do with it. But we do know that the creator then he's told us in Matthew, which I'm going to find at precept because I do want to show it. We find precept. So it's Matthew chapter 10 verse 32 and 33. So Matthew 10 and 32 and 33. So whosoever therefore shall confess me before men, him will I confess also before my Father which is in heaven. So these are the people that are going to humble themselves and submit themselves into that lifestyle, among the Gentiles. But whosoever shall deny me before men, him will I also deny before my Father which is in heaven. So just keep that in mind. So now we're going to verse 6 right here with Isaiah chapter 40. So the voice or the spirit saith, cry. And he said, so this is the messenger responding back to the voice, what shall I cry? So the messenger. And here's the response. So all flesh is grass. So this is Isaiah chapter 40 verse 6. And all the goodliness, so this is the glory of man, thereof is as the flower of the field. So then this is what the creator is responding with. So this goodliness in the flower of the field, we'll run some precepts on that because the creator then he's speaking to us in parables, and we have to run these precepts to get the understanding of what's going on. So we're just not looking at this literally. So got 1 Peter in 24 and 25. So for all flesh is compared as grass, and all the glory of man as the flower of grass. So the grass withereth, and the flower thereof falleth away. But the word of the Lord endureth forever. So then he's showing you that contrast, that the grass and the flower, so the glory of man, and that's going to pass away. But the word of the Lord endureth forever. And this is the word which by the gospel is preached unto you. So that word of God. So we'll start to build up on this right here, this grass withering and this flower fading. So this is what we're going to work off of. So we have 2 Peter, and we'll look at chapter 3 and go to verse 7. So, but the heavens and the earth, which are now, so this present heaven and earth that we're in right now, by the same word are kept in store, reserved unto fire against the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. So this is why then that grass is going to wither, and that flower then it's going to fade. Because then right when the time of refreshing comes, then he's going to destroy all of this, and we'll have a new heaven and a new earth. So applicationally, what this means to us is while we're in this present heaven and earth right now, we have Wisdom of Solomon chapter 2 verse 6 to 8. Just make sure that you're not getting caught up in it. So let's look at this right here. So come on, therefore, let us, well, actually, before we even go here, we'll look at, scroll up to verse 1. So Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 2, verse 1. For the ungodly saith, reasoning with themselves, so this is the ungodly, but not aright. Our life is short and tedious, and in the death of man there is no remedy, neither was there any man known to have returned from the grave. So for that reason, in verse 6, so come on therefore, and let us enjoy the good things that are present, so then the glory of men, so that those flowers that are out there, and let us speedily use the creatures like as in youth. Let us fill ourselves with costly wine and ointments. So this is spiritual talk. And let no flower of the spring pass by us. Let us crown ourselves with rosebuds. So this is what you're crowning yourself with before they be withered. So just, you only live once. So just living life till its fullest. Just getting caught up with all of the things that this world has to offer. But, they don't consider that there's a recompense for that at the very end, which when we move on to Isaiah in the precept written communication tool, so the grass withereth, the flower fadeth, because the Spirit of the Lord bloweth upon it. So this is why these two things are going to wither. And for these precepts, we have Ezekiel chapter 22, verse 21. So Ezekiel chapter 22 and 21. So yeah, I will gather you and blow upon you in the fire of my wrath, and you shall be melted in the midst thereof. So then you don't want, in this case right here, this illustration, the Spirit of the Lord blowing upon you as he's going to do this grass and this flower. Because when he's talking about blowing upon these, and that's in the fire of his wrath. So I'll read that again. So yeah, I will gather you and blow upon you in the fire of my wrath, and you shall be melted in the midst thereof. Which we can look at some end time prophecy about this right here. What's going on with Ezekiel when we hit second Idris, and we'll go to chapter just 13 and just look at it a little bit. So we have Ezekiel, and we have 13, and we'll look at verse 10 and 11. But only I saw that he sent out of his mouth, so this is talking about the Spirit of Christ, as it had been a blast of fire, and out of his lips a flaming breath, and out of his tongue he cast out sparks and tempests, and they were all mixed together. Which there's a semicolon. It's going to give you a list item of what's mixed together. So the blasts of the fire, the flaming breath, and the great tempests, and fell with violence upon the multitude which was prepared to fight, and burnt them up every one, so that upon a sudden of an innumerable multitude nothing was to be perceived, but only dust and smell of smoke. And when I saw this, I was afraid. Which, you take that for yourselves. You want to make sure that you're on the right side of the plumb line. Because if you're on the wrong side, you'll be a part of this grass that he's going to end up blowing upon in the end. And Idris is already telling us that nothing remained. At one point before, and he blew, then it was a sudden of an innumerable multitude, and afterwards there was nothing to be perceived. Also, all of that got burnt up. So what we'll do is now we're going down. And in this parable, he's making it clear. So surely the people is grass. So the grass withereth and the flower fadeth. But, so the contrast, the word of our God standeth forever. Which you can just look at that at 1 John chapter 2, verse 15 through 17. So now then we'll move on, because we have what's just going on here overall with Isaiah chapter 40, verse 1 through 8. So then it's this messenger then that's being sent to speak comfortably to these people so they can be pardoned and not get caught up in what's going to happen at the end. So now we'll look at the other verse then that was sent in that we're going to be working on. So Isaiah chapter 64 and verse 1 through 6. So now we're picking it up at verse 1. So, oh, that thou wouldest rent the heavens, that thou wouldest come down. So these heavens, and that's the separation of the knowledges of the people. So from the water that's below, from the water that's above. So that thou wouldest come down, and that the mountains might flow at thy presence. So this is a parable. As when the melting fire burneth, the fire causes the waters to boil. So, to start unraveling this parable, then we'll pick up this other Bible. And when it's saying thou wouldest come down, then that's talking about the word. So we'll go to Wisdom of Solomon. We will look at chapter 18 and go to verse 15 right here. So thine almighty word leap down from heaven out of thy royal throne, because that's the only thing that's coming from above. As a fierce man of war into the midst of a land of destruction, which that land of destruction, that's us. And when it's talking about the mountains flowing down at thy presence and the waters boiling, and that's referring to his adversaries, so trembling at his presence. So for these mountains flowing down, and we'll look at Nymph, and we will go to chapter 1, verse 5 and 6. So the mountains quake at him, and the hills melt, and the earth is burnt at his presence. So the world and all that dwell therein. So who can stand before his indignation, which we had just seen that with Idris? Then nobody is going to stand. And who can abide in the fierceness of his anger? So let's look at this. So we'll go to Ezekiel, and we'll go to chapter 22 and verse 20 through 22. So as they gather silver and brass and iron and lead and tin in the midst of the furnace to blow fire upon it and to melt it, so will I gather you in my anger and in my fury, and I will leave you there and melt you. So I will gather you and blow upon you in the fire of my wrath, and you shall be melted in the midst thereof. So as silver is melted in the midst of the furnace, so shall you be melted in the midst thereof, and you shall know that I, the Lord, have poured out my fury upon you. So then this is what you look at spiritually, these mountains, and these are talking about people. And right here in verse 2, the fire causes the waters to boil. Then these waters, and this is talking about people as well. So we have Revelations, and we'll see this in chapter 17, verse 15. So we're just pitting the pieces here to this parable. And he said unto me, so the waters which thou sawest where the horse sitteth are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. So you just look at these spiritually. So, oh, that the heavens, that thou rent the heavens, and that thou wouldest come down. So now we can read this with understanding. That the mountains might flow down at thy presence, as when the melting fire burneth. So this is a comparison. The fire causes the waters to boil, to make thy name so thy way known to thy adversaries, and that the nations might tremble at thy presence. So now we're going on more. So when thou didst terrible things which we looked not for, thou camest down, and the mountains flowed down at thy presence. So, for since the beginning of the world, men have not heard, nor perceived by ear, neither has the eye seen, O God, beside thee, what he has prepared for him that waiteth for him. So the people that's patient. Thou meetest him that rejoices and worketh righteousness, those that remember thee in the ways. And remember, thou art wroth, which we have that semicolon there, and he's going to explain on the other side of this thought why he's wroth. So, for we have sinned, and that's why. And in those, so these sins is continuance, and we shall be saved. So, what's going on here is that I run you to Zechariah, and we will look at chapter 13 and verse 8. So the third part is going to come through this fire. And it shall come to pass that in the land, saith the Lord, so 2 parts therein shall be cut off and die, but the third shall be left therein. And I will bring the third part through the fire. So they're going to go through this furnace of adversity, and will refine them as silver is refined, and I will try them as gold is tried. And they shall call upon my way, and I will hear them. And I will say, it is my people, and they shall say, the Lord is my God. So those are going to be the jewels right there, the people that's coming through this fire. Which, to wrap this up, and we're getting to the last part of this verse, so I pulled back so we can get right here to the verse that was actually emailed in. But we, so the contrast, are all as an unclean thing, and all our righteousness are as filthy rags. So, to start tearing this down, but we, so the topic, are all as an unclean thing. So making that comparison, and all of our righteousness are as filthy rags, which that makes the perfect sense, because, if we're unclean, then anything that comes from us, and it's going to be unclean as well. When you look at Job chapter 14, verse 4. So who can bring a clean thing out of an unclean? Not one. So our righteousness, because we're unclean, the things that we do, it's unclean. And there's that semicolon there. So this topic, then it stops right here. And on the other side of the semicolon, we're getting a new topic. So then this topic, then it's a change in directions. So now the topic now is, and we all do fade as a leaf. That semicolon. And now we have a new topic, which is now the iniquities. So at first, and it was the righteousness being the filthy rags, and then the fading as a leaf. Now on the other side of the semicolon, now it's dealing with our iniquities. And our iniquities, like the wind, so it's making a comparison, have taken us away. So we'll see this. So we have Matthew, and we have chapter 7, verse 24 and 25. So therefore, whosoever heareth these sayings of mine, and doeth them, I will liken unto him a wise man, which built his house upon a rock. And it's giving you an explanation of what this is talking about, this house being built on a rock. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat upon that house, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. And every one that heareth these sayings of mine, and doeth them not, shall be likened unto a foolish man, so without knowledge, which built his house upon the sand. And the rains descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat upon that house, because he has no knowledge, and it fell. And great was the fall of it. Which now we'll go to Psalms in 1 and 1 through 5. So wisdom is given the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. But his delight, so that desire, is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doeth he meditate day and night. And he shall be like a tree, so it's making that comparison, planted by the rivers of water, that bringeth forth his fruit in season, and his leaf also shall not wither, so that covering, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. The ungodly are not so, but are like the chaff which the wind, so those iniquities driveth away. And for that reason, since they're driven away, the ungodly shall not stand in the doctrines and teachings, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous, because you can't serve two masters. So that wraps up, this breakdown in the precept written communication tool, and it's just showing you that semicolon, then it's not breaking the verse, so Satan's thoughts can come in, and it's separating Satan's thoughts from God's thoughts. Or the semicolon, and it's just pitting that separation between ideas that are connected, and you're not just using a full stop or a comma. So with that being said, is there any sort of questions or comments and concerns before we close out? So don't see any. So with that being said, then we'll do another one next morning, and we'll have a lesson also next week, not this afternoon, but next week. Then we'll have also a lesson in the afternoon as well. So until next time, then I'll just say then a shalom and peace.